Welcome to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And just want to start off this episode with a programming note. I know that we have many loyal viewers who devour our new episodes as soon as they are released, and I do thank all of you sincerely. But I know that all of you have lives as well. So just want to let you know that there will be no new episodes for a week starting on Monday, July 22nd. So with these episodes over the next 5 or 6 days, you don't have to devour them as voraciously as you sometimes do. If you don't want to binge watch and you want to save up a few episodes for next week when there will be no new episodes being released, that is entirely your prerogative. And with that note out of the way, we'll get this episode started. I oftentimes say this at the beginning of episodes, and I never really know where we'll end up going. But I think this is going to be a relatively short one. There's really just two primary things that I want to figure out over the next month or so of game time. First and foremost is whether the free agent that we have pinned potentially the hopes of our franchise and certainly this offseason on in the second baseman from Japan, Shoji Bame, whether or not he will actually sign with us for the big $112 million over 5-year deal that we've offered him. Right now he claims that he favors the offer, but he is a guy who has high financial ambition and low loyalty. So if a competing offer that's more attractive than ours happens to come in the coming days, it's not inconceivable that he'll come back to us looking for more money, and we'll probably have an interesting decision to have to make. So hopefully in the not so distant future, we'll find out what's going on with Bame. The other thing that we're going to focus on in this episode and hopefully get some resolution on is international amateur free agency. And I want to start off by, as always, thanking our worldwide scouting department for coming through once again. My impression at the end of the last episode when I looked at the class was that the pitchers, at least at the high end, were somewhat more interesting to me than the position players. And I think overwhelmingly our worldwide scouting team has agreed that this may be the year to take a flyer on a pitcher. I've also gotten the suggestion to maybe not go after one of the top prospects and put together a larger class more similar to what we did last season. Honestly, the only position player that anyone mentioned was Nelson Del Rio, who was mentioned by YME943, and even YME943 ultimately preferred one of the top pitching prospects over Del Rio, but he said if we were going to go with an everyday player that Del Rio would be his selection, and with potentially 65 contact, 75 home run power, and good gap power, and a potentially average eye, coupled with a high work ethic, I can certainly see that Del Rio could be an interesting prospect if we were going to go with a position player. But as I noted last time out, I kind of preferred the three top-end pitchers, and as I noted, that seems to be the direction that our worldwide scouting department is recommending as well. A lot of individual recommendations on the pitchers, which we'll talk through as we go through the list of the preferences of our viewers. One viewer, actually, Jeansy, was like, I don't really care which pitcher you take, you just need to take a pitcher, which I tend to agree with. And I don't think there's a ton of differentiation between these three pitchers. They've all got things that I like a lot. They've all got minor concerns that are different. When I stack the three of them up against each other, I feel like there's not a huge difference between the three of them to me. It's really a matter of preferences. Looking at these three guys, one of them probably becomes a superstar, one of them probably becomes a useful major leaguer, and one of them probably flames out entirely. And hopefully will ultimately make the right decision, but we'll certainly be tracking all three of their careers no matter what we decide to do. And the least popular of the three players that we're going to end up going with one of, would love to perhaps double up, but with the money that they're looking for, even with the $5.7 million that we have to spend, not going to be realistic to try to get two of them. We'll be pretty happy if I can just lock up one of these top three. But the third choice among viewers, the top pick among pitchers only by Kevin McDowell, is David Capetillo. Lippy is a 17-year-old right-hander out of the Dominican. He's durable as far as his injury proneness, the only one of the three with that high ranking, high loyalty and intelligence, but he definitely wants to get paid. Common theme, as we'll see among these three pitchers, he's got ground ball tendencies and he throws in the low to mid 90s. Decent stamina, pretty good at holding on runners. A potential 6-pitch arsenal. Realistically, it's probably 5 at the top end, but with a fastball and a slider that are already 40 rated, and then 3 other pitches that are 35s that we think can get into above average territory. Certainly should have the arsenal to be a solid starter. If everything goes well with Capetillo, 70 stuff, 60 movement, and 65 control, and is robust as those ceiling numbers for Capetillo are. I'd say the ceiling on him with the basic pitching ratings is probably the least impressive of these three guys, which goes a long way towards saying my point that I don't think we can really make a wrong decision, and I don't think there's really a ton of differentiation between these guys. The big positives that I see for Capetillo: he's durable. He's potentially got as expansive or the most expansive arsenal of pitches of this group. The downsides, and they're not significant, even with that 70, 60, and 65 ceilings, his overall top potential is a little less impressive than the other guys, and he doesn't have quite the same stamina. But not a lot of holes in Capetillo's game, that's for sure. Choice number 2 among the viewers is Jesus Saldana, also known as Trey. Saldana with pretty significant support. John Lambert, Max Taylor, Dodo Dude, and Jarek Braxton all tabbed him as the guy they would probably go with if push came to shove among the pitchers. Ground baller, throws in the mid to low 90s, as we touched upon. A little more stamina than Capetillo. Not quite as good at holding on runners. Does have high leadership, no negative personality traits, but also not those work ethic and intelligence and adaptability traits that can sometimes help a little more in terms of spurring the development forward. A guy who could have a 4 to 5 pitch arsenal, or realistically he could have a 3 to 5 pitch arsenal. That curveball, similar to what we talked about with Capetillo and his 6th pitch, the 5th pitch here for Saldana, we don't think is going to be too much. So he's probably at best a 4-pitch guy. The things that I really like about Saldana is his fastball, his sinker, and his splitter are all already 40 plus. So feel pretty confident he's going to have 3 above average pitches when all is said and done, and if that changeup develops, he could be devastatingly effective. Peak values for him a little better than Capetillo overall, with potential for 75 stuff, 65 movement, and 70 control. That's an absolutely incredible combination if he can get near those figures. Does certainly have some work to do keeping the ball in the ballpark and with his control. but we think that both of those numbers could be more than acceptable if he reaches his full potential. The key to him is going to be that changeup. That's going to be the difference in my mind between whether he becomes a good major league pitcher or a potentially great major league pitcher. If he's got the 3-pitch arsenal, with the splitter being the only world-class pitch, he's probably a good major league pitcher. But if that changeup develops along with everything else, certainly has the profile to be a great one. And the most popular choice among our worldwide scouting department among the pitchers was Julio Vaca, Soldier. We did have one major detractor for him, Kevin McDowell, who, as we talked about earlier, preferred Capetillo. Really concerned about that dismal hold runners rating for Vaca, and that's definitely a concern of mine as well. Probably not ultimately a decision maker. But Vaca was favored by more people than anybody. DLL first base 14, Max Taylor, the notorious KEV, Wyme 943, fake name, Ethan, and Dodo Dude kind of voted for both Vaca and Saldana. I think he preferred Saldana, but he also mentioned he was more than comfortable with Vaca. So some good support for Soldier. The big concern is the hold runners, at least, in terms of just being something that he's obviously awful at. To me, what I'm a little more concerned about is whether he's going to develop the third and possibly even the fourth pitch necessary to be a big-time starter. With that 40 slider and that 40 curve and the upside that we see on those, I think he could definitely be a very effective bullpen arm. Is kind of a worst-case scenario. But he's got a lot of work to do with that changeup, and he's got a bit of work to do with that sinker as well. And if the sinker develops, he's probably fine. And if the sinker and the changeup both develop, similar to what we were talking about with Saldana, if he gets those two pitches to develop, his stuff could be absolutely overwhelming. World-class stuff, potentially 65 movement and 70 control. So I think the top end of Vaca is probably a notch better than the top end of Saldana, which is a notch better than the top end of Capetillo. But they're all very close to me. Vaca with the extreme ground ball tendencies, but still throws in the low to mid 90s. Love the fact that he's already got 45 movement on his pitches, and he's pretty good at keeping the ball in the yard already. And we think he's already kind of reached his full potential in terms of his ability to pitch to less than optimal contact by the hitters. So a lot to like with him. As we outlined, the only blemishes in my mind are, does he develop the third pitch he needs to be a starter? Because if he does with that 70 stamina, it will be incredible. The notorious KEV brought up the point that the worst case scenario for Vaca is an outstanding arm that can probably pitch a ton of innings out of the bullpen with that stamina. And it's pretty hard for me to argue with that assessment. So I really like all three of these guys. As I mentioned, I don't think it's a decision that I'm going to regret as long as I end up with one of the three. Certainly over the next 6, 8, 10 seasons, we'll find out who got lucky and developed well, and who perhaps got a little bit unlucky and didn't develop as well as would have been hoped. But in this situation, I am going to go against the majority. And it seems like over the last few drafts and the last few IAFA periods, I've generally ended up going with what the majority recommended. But in this case, I'm going to go with the second choice, Jesus Saldana. And as I mentioned, there's still 4 viewers who he was their top choice, so he was still a pretty popular pick, although not as popular as Vaca. As I noted, if everything works well with Vaca, he's got the highest end talent and the biggest ceiling and the highest ceiling of anyone in this class. But if the changeup and sinker both don't develop, he's kind of forced into a relief role, and I really want a guy who's got a higher probability of becoming a starter when all is said and done. I also don't love the 20 rating to hold runners. The notorious KEV brought up the point, well, with his pitching profile, there's not going to be any runners on base, so who cares? And I get that point. But I think Saldana, with 3 pitches that are basically already trending towards being major league quality, and the potential to add in an excellent changeup and possibly a useful curveball, has a higher probability than Vaca of ultimately having a starting pitcher's arsenal. And even though his top end stuff is not quite as good, and he's got a little bit more work to do in terms of keeping the ball in the park, I think he's a little bit more well-balanced as a prospect. And I also do kind of like the fact that he's looking for $1 million less. There's certainly an argument to just pay somebody full freight, sign one guy this year, and obviously with $5.7 million, we've got the capability of doing that. But I wouldn't mind taking a few more shots down the line. And if we do Saldana rather than Capetillo or Vaca, it's going to give us potentially a little more flexibility to do that. So we are going to offer Trey Saldana 25% more than he's looking for, $3.5 million, to hopefully just get him locked up early and often. And then if we have some money available, we'll go after somebody else. What I don't want to do is get myself into a position where potentially all 3 of these guys are going for $5+ million, and I've got $1 million offer outstanding to somebody else, or even worse, already accepted by somebody else, and I can't get one of the top 3 pitchers. So we're kind of committed to Saldana at this point. If he comes back and says, hey, I want $5.7 million immediately to sign, clearly we'll have the opportunity to try to do that. But that could also encourage me to perhaps pivot to Vaca. I don't really see a scenario where I'm going to go with Capetillo, but as I said, the 3 guys in this class, I like them all. Ultimately, probably only one is going to be proven a great winner, and we're going to cross our fingers and hope that it'll be Saldana, assuming that he's the guy we end up signing. And early feedback from Saldana is positive. Says the offer is fair. Unless someone offers him a better one, he'll sign with us. But supposedly the Rays, the Dodgers, and the Yankees are also already sniffing around Saldana. One other thing that I did like about him that I didn't mention, and I don't have a great sense of how important it really is in the game, but the fact that he's a monster. It's 6'7" tall. As opposed to the other guys who are both 6'1". I didn't really factor it into the decision making that much, but I do have Randy Johnson vibes almost when I see a guy who's 6'7", although obviously Saldana still needs to gain another 3 or 4 inches or so to catch up to a guy like Randy Johnson in his prime. But I do, for whatever reason, kind of, all else being equal, like the players who are just bigger and stronger, especially at a young age. I don't honestly have a great sense of how that ultimately plays out in the game. If any of you have experiences with success or lack of success with really big or really small players, Would love to hear about that in the comments, and I'm sure it would help some other viewers as well. And a guy we rented last season, Hagen Smith, who was not all that successful with us with a 5.57 ERA over 21 innings, has signed with the Mets. The fans are disappointed. Fan interest has decreased noticeably, which in this case resulted in a 1-point drop to 54, which unfortunately puts us right back to where we were at the start of this offseason. We had climbed up to 56, but through a couple of recent departures, we are back down to where we started. And unfortunately, even if we do end up signing Mr. Bame, his popularity is unknown, so I'm not expecting to necessarily get a huge boost. Which is a little surprising because clearly a player with his profile likely would have been coming over from Japan with a pretty huge reputation, and if we're really able to sign him for what would be the largest contract we've given to anybody in the 8+ years of this playthrough, you figure the fans in Oakland would probably be somewhat excited by that, but I don't think that will be the case, unfortunately. And while we're still waiting to hear what happened with Bame, we've got Jesus Saldana locked up. So I think the aggressive bid right out of the gates locked him up for $3.5 million and hopefully helped prevent us from getting in a bidding war at a number $4.5, $5.5 million for him, which is certainly possible. So that'll give us an opportunity to pivot to some other players quickly. There is one that I have had on my radar since the last episode if things went well and we were able to get whichever pitcher we ended up going for early. And that would be pivoting to the third baseman, Rogelio Contreras, who's only looking for $1 million supposedly. Very easy signing for us. Think he's kind of your prototypical old school third baseman. Really good arm, potentially excellent home run power. He's got high adaptability and intelligence. Not necessarily a great defensive player, not necessarily a great guy as far as batting average or even drawing walks, but our scout views him as a 3.5-star prospect, and he's looking for a lot less money than a lot of other guys who are in that range. So we're going to try to get an offer out to Rogelio Contreras right now. Claims he's only looking for $1 million. We're going to be aggressive with him as well. And we're going to go 25% over right away. That'll still leave us $950,000 if we're able to lock him up quickly for this amount. What I'm trying to avoid is a situation where Sammy Pickles lingers on the market for a long time and ends up going for a little more money than we can possibly afford. So we'll get an offer out to Contreras now and hopefully maybe get him locked up in the next week or so, and then we can still have a little bit of money to spend and pivot on some other prospects. There's always the opportunity to potentially trade away some of that IAFA money. If things fall apart with Bame, we may be in a situation where we need to strongly pivot to the trade market to bring on the type of bat that we want to. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but if it does, we've still got a little bit of money left. The issue is, will we find out what Bame wants to do soon enough for that IAFA money to have significant value? And Mr. Contreras does like our offer, and we continue to wait on Mr. Bame, who is taking his sweet time to make this big decision. And the nightmare scenario with Bame that we talked about at the start of this episode seems to be emerging. We had offered him over $22 million a year for 5 years. Now supposedly he's had enough interest that he's looking for over $23 million a year for 8 years. I know that Stanley Rosella right now thinks this is a huge break for us and we can just walk away. To me, the struggle is if we walk away right now, probably the most interesting right-handed bat on the market is either Brett Harris, who's 33 years old, not as good defensively and not as good offensively, with a 109 WRC plus over the course of his career, or perhaps even reuniting with our rental from last year in Royce Lewis, who did do a very nice job for us, put up a 138 WRC plus. Does bring a better personality to the team. And has been a bit better than Harris over the course of his career with a 111 WRC plus. But he's also going to be 33 years old shortly. But he's a proven major leaguer. 55 contact, I think, is the same as Bame. The 60 power is nowhere close. And then he's got 55 gap power and a 50 eye. Actually, the contact for Lewis is a little higher right now. I was thinking about Bame's peak at 55. Gap power is the same for both of them, but it certainly is a little more useful with Mr. Lewis, who I think is a little, actually might not have that much more speed. I could just put these guys up against each other, and I guess that would be a much more effective way of looking at this comparison. Actually, Royce Lewis has only slightly higher running speed, even though he's a much better base runner overall. You know, when we look at full potential, and again, who knows if Bame reaches the full potential, but similar contact, similar gap power. Bame is going to strike out more, but Bame is going to hit a lot more homers, and Bame is going to draw a lot more walks. He's also younger. Defensively, a little more range for Bame, and all else being equal, I think range is the most important rating, because if you can't get to the ball, doesn't matter how good you are at handling those chances or making throws or turning the double play. If you're not able to at least get close enough to get a glove on it, it doesn't matter. So the higher range for Bame is important, but the error rating for Lewis is a little bit better, and the turn double play rating for Lewis is a little bit better. This is definitely an interesting decision, because Bame, I've had concerns about that personality. He doesn't have as much speed. I've talked about this in the comments to other episodes, and I know that some of you have experienced the same thing as me, where it seems like international free agents in their first year in the majors sometimes don't produce quite what you would expect given their ratings, and it seems to take them a year to get used to it. And given that we're kind of in a win-now team for this 2032 season, we don't necessarily have the luxury of letting a 28-year-old who we're going to be paying $20-some-odd million a year to take his time getting comfortable in the majors. So right now, Bame, wow. He says he wants 5 years at almost $27 million a year for us. So the high financial ambition that we talked about does seem to be impacting things here. Royce Lewis, could we reunite with him? I mean, he does give us that right-handed bat that we wanted to get this off season. We were just never really even thinking of Lewis as a practical candidate to reunite with the money he was looking for, and the fact that we felt there were a couple slightly higher end targets, one of which was Bame. But I do like the fact that Lewis was absolutely incredible in the less than half season that we had him. And he's also very popular locally, so we might get a small boost if we signed him. He says he's looking for only 4 years at an average of 17.4. He does allegedly have an offer from one of the Chicago teams. I don't know whether it was the Cubs or the White Sox. So we're probably going to need to come close to that number to bring him on board. But that number for Lewis is on average about $10 million less at this point than what Bame is looking for. And I spent a little time offline going through the rest of the right-handed hitters who are still free agents, and I think the other most interesting option is Austin Riley. Over the course of his career with a 126 WRC plus, he has been the most prolific right-handed hitter out of this bunch that we're talking about. Obviously, Bame has never played in the majors yet, and Lewis has been up several years fewer than Riley has at this point. But Riley, with 424 home runs, close to 1,200 ribbies, and a career WAR that's approaching 50, is closing in, as he closes in on the age of 35, of Hall of Fame type numbers over the course of his career. He's now hit 30 home runs or more or over 30 home runs for 11 consecutive seasons. So just incredibly consistent out there every day for the Atlanta Braves organization for over a decade. Defensively, he's not as good as Bame or Lewis. Doesn't have much speed left. Does have high work ethic and intelligence, and he's still got solid ratings. I mean, he hit 34 homers a year ago, but the batting average dipped to 234, and the trend is he's gotten towards his mid-30s. His batting average has dipped from 283 to 252 to 234. The WRC plus has dipped to 128, or from 128 to 105 to 95. The first time he's been a below-average offensive player since he became a full-time player in 2021. So the trend has not been his friend, and he's the oldest guy out there. He's looking for the least money, clearly. 4 years, only $11.6 million. He's extremely popular, so we'd probably get the biggest boost to fan interest bringing Riley on board. But we really don't need another first base / DH type, and although he can play a very mediocre third base, he's really a first baseman or maybe a left fielder at this point if we're desperate. Whereas last year we started training Royce Lewis a little bit when we picked him up to play left field. But even if we don't end up playing Lewis in an infield position this year, we could certainly get him trained up to play a more than competent left field in spring training, having access to him for the full time. And Bame, not quite the same range in the outfield as Lewis, a bit better arm, but certainly also capable of playing a corner outfield spot for us if we needed him to. And I realize with this going back and forth with the Bame situation that I've once again lied to you about this probably being a short episode, but you knew what you were getting into how many minutes this episode was when you started clicking on it, so you probably knew I was lying long before I did. I'm not going to go with Riley. I'm not going to go with Brett Harris. It's going to be a reunion with Royce Lewis, or it's going to be Bame. And this is the type of decision that I'd like to turn over for at least some guidance to the worldwide scouting department. But I'm also a big boy, and I need to make some of these decisions on my own. And I tend to think most of you are going to disagree with what I ultimately do here. The points in favor of Bame are that he's got better power, better eye, better range, and he's younger than Royce Lewis. The negatives for Bame are that he's looking for about $10 million a year more. He's never actually done it in the major leagues. He's got less speed. He's got not the greatest personality in the world. And he still does somehow have this profile where, although he's got tremendous home run power, his profile is for a lot of ground balls. And the advantages of Lewis are the opposite of what I just talked about. More speed, better personality, less money, and a proven major leaguer who's proven he can do it in Oakland. His contact is actually a bit better because we're projecting where Bame might go. The gap power is the same, but with the higher speed for Lewis, it's a little more useful. But clearly the power in the eye for Royce Lewis are not in the same borderline exceptional range that Bame is. And there are three pretty interesting hitters who happen to be on the trade block right now too. And no, I am not considering Hidero Endo among those, despite his still outstanding home run power. But Michael Harris II, Cole Young, and Marco Luciano are all on the trade block. Harris II is in the final year of his contract, making $20 million with the Braves. He's not willing to waive his no-trade clause, though, so that's not an option. Cole Young making $36 million. And if we try to get the Mariners to retain a good chunk of that contract, we have to give up. Well, I can show you here again. I don't have to just tell you. But we have to give up one of the top players in our organization, even with them retaining $14.4 million, which still has us on the hook for over $20 million. We got to give up Colt Keith or Luis Lara to get the deal done. So that's kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. And then Marco Luciano has got a pretty negative personality, much like Mr. Endo. There's more guys who make the deal work, but we're still getting rid of a very important guy on our team to bring Luciano on board. So I still think that the free agent route is the best route for us this year, where we've got some money to spend. And as I noted a few moments ago, I think a lot of you are not going to like this decision that we make. And I don't necessarily feel great about it, particularly in a win now season. But we're going to walk away from Bame and go with a guy with a much lower ceiling in Royce Lewis, which again is not potentially ideal for a year that we've set up as a win now season. But Lewis was very productive with us last year. He's looking for about $10 million less. He's a proven major leaguer. He's potentially better if he ends up in a corner outfield spot. He's got a better personality. And ultimately, Bame's selfishness factors into this. But it's really the fact that we've now had 2 times where we had an offer out to Bame that he said that he favored, and he's come back and said he wants more money. So this is the 3rd attempt at this on his end. And he's looking for, as I said, $27 million a year for 5 years now. But my fear is that may not be enough with him. Or he may just not really want to sign with us. And if we engage with him one more round, particularly with the fact that we know that Lewis supposedly has interest from one of the Chicago teams, if we mess around with Bame for another couple of weeks, since he hasn't been particularly proactive in giving us feedback, and then obviously has not been proactive at all in actually signing a contract. If we wait much longer with Bame, Lewis will be off the market, and then it'll be a pretty significant drop down to a Brett Harris or an Austin Riley, who I don't think fit what we need as well as Lewis does. So the Bame dream is over. I think money-wise, I'm going to have to be pretty close to what he's asking for, since he's allegedly got another offer. In fact, I'm probably going to give him exactly what he's looking for, if not a little bit more money. But I'm going to try to structure the contract a little bit differently and maybe have it in a way that gives us some outs in the out years of this deal. And we're going to offer Lewis an average of $17.5 million over 4 years. But the final 2 seasons are team options, so it's really only a guaranteed 2-year deal. And you can see we've got a lower number this year at just $14 million, which should give us some payroll flexibility to maybe look to add some more help once the season gets going as we get closer to the trade deadline. He's claiming he wants more money, but what that really just means is that he doesn't want those team options. I don't think it's an untradeable contract at 4 years with that money for Royce Lewis. He came back with such a big increase financially that I don't think he's going to go for this team option in the 4th season, even though we took out the team option in the 3rd. But it still looks like we might get one more crack at him by the nice smile he has on his face right now, even if he doesn't go for this. Well, he says he's willing to think about it. So we're going to submit the offer, 4 years, $71 million to Lewis. and we'll see what happens. And we have gotten Rogelio Contreras signed, so that's a nice second fiddle as far as our IAFA players this year. We've still got $950,000 less, so we're going to start looking for maybe another player or two to round out our international complex and give us another lottery ticket or two. But clearly the big thing that we're waiting on at this point with two IAFA guys that we really like being signed is what's going to happen with the offer to Mr. Lewis and where Mr. Bame ends up going, or if Lewis comes back to us and says, hey, I'm signing with somebody else or I want more money, maybe there's still time to pivot back to Bame. This has become quite a saga. And we've made it to the start of the preseason. Budget still at $158 million, which is the most we've ever had, although it's still $20 million below the second lowest team in baseball in the Pirates. So for a 9th consecutive year, we'll have the smallest budget in all of baseball. But we've been successful at times despite those issues. The big issue now is that Royce Lewis is coming back and saying that he wants more money now. Says he's looking at 4 years, $18.6 million. Bame still saying he wants 5 years. And I think that number's gone up a little, $27.8 million a year. I want to say it was just below $27 million the last time we checked in on the professor. So both of these guys are holding our feet to the fire. And since we're once again at a decision point and it's getting late, I am going to ultimately open it up to those of you in the Worldwide Scouting Department who have some thoughts to share with us on this situation. Would you go with Bame? Would you go with Lewis? Or would you go with someone else? Austin Riley is still out there. But it looks like Brett Harris has now been signed, so that's one fewer right-handed hitter on the market. I don't know that you're going to be able to sway me back to Bame, but I'd love to hear what those of you who are on the Bame train are thinking. You do have an opportunity to maybe turn me away from the ledge that is Royce Lewis. But I know some of you want me to go with Lewis because you hate Bame. So we're in an interesting spot here. I like the two guys that we've gotten in international amateur free agency. But we're now at the start of the preseason, and we've made it all the way to January. And despite having a lot of money to potentially spend on a marquee free agent this offseason, we still have not been able to do anything on that front. And hopefully we'll eventually be able to sign or trade for someone in our next episode, because we definitely need some more help with this team. But until that next time around, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.